reporting on the games you love by people who love to game. The MMO Reporter Network.
Alright, so we got one or two people here that give a damn about RPGs, apparently.
Glad to see it. We are the Art of the Table, GMing Beyond the Basics, and today we're here to peel back that DM screen and show you the face that happens to be behind that beholder that's trying to chew your face off. So we're going to unveil the mysteries of GMs, or at least the mysteries as we see them. So we'll start out by introducing our panelists, what they do, and then I'd like each of you to give 3 words that describes you as a GM.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Mike Selinker. I'm the designer of the Pathfinder adventure card game. I was a creative director on 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons. I also do some board games. You may have seen Lords of Vegas and Pirates of the Spanish Main and Betrayal at House on the Hill and Unspeakable Words, which, by the way, you may have received a card about. It's currently on Kickstarter, so check it out if you like. I was also at Paizo when Pathfinder launched, and so, and if anything, I may represent kind of the old guard on this panel, so we'll see if that works out.
Oh, in 3 words.
Oh, in 3 words.
Describe you as a GM.
God, I can only do it in 4.
You can always add overachiever.
All right. I think the 4 words is not on your side.
Hey, my name is Ben Mandal. I'm the crazy masochist who started the Art of the Table a couple of years ago, and it's been well received ever since. I've done some writing for a couple of different gaming websites, and we're currently working on assembling an anthology of the advice we've done here at Art of the Table. And unfortunately, I don't have a Kickstarter to throw out at you yet, but soon, hopefully.
Not required.
No. Well, I just feel like, you know, I'm the hack comedian coming in after Robin Williams right now, following that resume. Yeah, I've just been GMing for a couple of decades. Started like a lot of you when no one else wanted to pick up the screen and went, this looks like fun. And then it kind of stuck. And if I was going to give 3 words about my own style, I'd probably say silly, improv, and does what the hell count as a single word?
We're all
Use
overachieving.
hyphens.
We're all overachieving today.
All right.
All right. Hi, I'm Danielle Lozon. I am a freelance author for Onyx Path Publishing. I've written on a lot of their lines, so Demon the Descent, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Awakening. I'm going to start writing on the new 2nd edition of Changeling, The Lost, some other random stuff. So yeah, that's what I've done. So 3 words for my GMing style: devious, unorganized, and silly.
I'm Randy Schooneman with Steve Jackson Games. I've had a lot of roles there. The current one is retail liaison, which doesn't mean a whole lot to most of you. As far as my 3 words, it would be confrontational, learning, and freeform.
I'm Frank Gordon, cinematic designer at BioWare. Worked on Inquisition last. My 3 words would probably be casual and rules agnostic. I tend to run more of the beer league types of games. I have been known to make things up on the spot.
Horrors.
Whatever will we do? Luckily, we have our 2 extremes on the opposite sides of the camp. All right, so let's start out with what you guys love most about being a GM, a DM, a freeform games manager, whatever you want to call yourself.
Freeform games, man.
You should talk to HR about that.
I actually associate with that last one.
What do we love?
I don't know. I've always loved actually just spending the time with the same group of people. These guys I've hung out with forever, and it's kind of a way to get to know them better and how they think of stories. We're all big big readers, and telling our own stories, seeing what they would really want to see in it, and how they react when something just goes completely off the wall. Just hanging out, really. The beer league type mentality, the fun.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We used to play at Denny's back in the day. The guys in the corner with the dice and everybody stay. But yeah, it's definitely the people, and I love that that moment when the plan just goes completely to shit. Yeah, it's all the players and definitely the people.
I don't know. I'm actually kind of the opposite. I think my favorite thing about running a game for people, it doesn't matter who they are, if I know them or not, is when I am able to get them so involved in the story that when they leave, they are still talking about it 10 years later.
Sure. Absolutely.
And they're like, oh
Yeah.
my god, and then this happened, and it was the most amazing thing ever, and our plan worked, it was awesome. And yeah, so that's my favorite thing.
I think, so I wrote a book called The Book of Challenges for Dungeons & Dragons, and I was specifically asked to do this book because it was sort of the most devious, mean-spirited things that a game master could ever throw at players. And in the introduction I said, the secret of dungeon mastering, is the big dirty secret is that we're actually on the player's side. We're trying to help them get through a thing. But this was not that book. This is the book. This was the book that for when you think one of the players has keyed your car. And so, I mean, I kind of like, I don't really feel that way all the time, but I kind of feel like when I walk into a room, the thing I like is that everybody kind of, you know, what are we in store for, right? What is Mike built that we're going to have to, assail and try to get out alive? I actually really like the challenge of the sort of 1 on 6 or 1 on 100 or 1 on 1,000 battle.
And I certainly can't disagree with any of these points, but for me, hands down, my favorite part of the game is what's called bleed, when the real person starts feeling emotions because of what's happening to their character. When you get that moment where the villain did the right thing and they just hit him where it hurts, and it's now the players who want to see the villain suffer, not just the characters. That's a good moment for me.
That's awesome.
That is great stuff. So moving off of our freeform versus structured people, do you guys prefer pre-written modules, or do you prefer to build your own homebrew adventures? And why does that option work for you?
If you're new to it, you almost need that. Like when you're just getting started, you almost need those tools, those canned adventures, as we would call them, to like, well, what should I really be doing? And then once you're like, I don't really like the way this part worked, and you're mutating those parts, it's the primer, it's the how to do this, and it actually gets you out there, and you're either going to succeed or fail with it. And those canned ones can run off the rails too if your players want to run the other direction and they just don't want to be who was written into that scene. Those canned ones just go quick; they're done. So but it's for learning. I mean, after that, I really feel everybody should be moving away from those to their own, taking their own pieces. You might pick them up to get ideas for your own things, but eventually you want to be the artist, you want to be the author, you want to be the storyteller. You don't just want to be the mouthpiece for the book.
Hey, Randy, do you work for a company that relies on the sales of prepackaged adventures?
I do not, sir.
Because if I might take the other opinion,
Please do.
for no particular reason. I'm joking. I'm absolutely joking. I like the script. I mean, I really like, I've got sort of an actor mentality. I like the thing that somebody has laid out for me that I know I'm not going to necessarily do exactly what's there, but I mean, having the amazing creativity of somebody else writing down this brilliant adventure path or whatever, and I can get in there and just sort of riff on what they've done and show my own skills. I actually think that's not just beginners. That's a real challenge, and I think it's really fun.
I'm going to have to agree because for me, I like to think of it as a little bit of writing pay it forward. I get paid to write those kinds of things, so I'm constantly coming up with ideas, coming up with story ideas and story hooks, and how do we get the players involved and what kind of game. And so when I go to run a game, I'm like totally burned out on that, and somebody else has done that same job and got paid for it, and I can just use their work, and it's awesome.
How about you, Frank?
Well, for a beginner, I absolutely think they're fantastic. They give you a really good feel of pacing. And what are the big beats you have to hit? I moved away from CAN modules as a whole pretty quickly, but I still love to read through them and pick the bits that I love out of that track, right? Or that moment or that character, and incorporate it into my games. So.
And I don't know how many of you guys grew up on, say, mid-'80s cartoons, but I did. And one of the benefits I've found with modules is if you were watching, say, Jason the Wheeled Warriors or Thundar the Barbarian, there was no explanation of the continuity, just, we're here, new adventure, go! And running modules lets me get that sort of episodic feel of, oh, the PCs have stumbled into this village, do some things! But echoing part of what Frank was saying, when you can hybridize the pre-written with your own style and pick out an NPC, or go, hey, so the first half of this adventure rocks, and I have no idea what the author was smoking on the second half of it, and then just tailor it to the group, or sometimes even mash multiple modules together. It's like rolling a couple of dice and seeing, all right, which GURPS books am I going to pick for today's adventure? And that works just as well for mashing together a couple of Pathfinder or White Wolf adventures.
I'm currently playing in Rodney Thompson's 5e campaign, and so two things are notable about that. The first is the rules kept changing on us, and so we had to give up. But the second was, at some point, we just went off script, and we've never come back. Like, it's been months now since we've been in the adventure. But, he's using the material that's in Tyranny of Dragons to inform what it is we're doing, but not like we haven't been in a room in the adventure for 5 months. And so, it's I think at some point you always go off script, even if you start with a prepackaged thing, because players won't let you stay there.
All right, this is where we get to the audience participation part of our panel. Those of you who have questions for our panelists, anything related to GMing, world building, any of that, we have 2 microphones set up here. Go ahead and form a line behind each of the microphones, and we'll try and get through all of your questions. The only thing that I ask is no elbowing the person in front of you in line.
I'm going to throw one on top of that, see if I can get some audience buy-in. You are all wonderful people, and I love you all for coming and feeding our egos today. Can we make an agreement with you? No, let me tell you about my character stories. All right, you people are awesome.
Don't be shy.
Or that one time you were in the adventure and the giant frog showed up, and oh my god, it was amazing. Let's just assume it's implied.
Agreed. All right, let's start at the front here.
Hi there. So I consider myself sort of a intermediate GM, just coming out sort of the beginning fledgling stages, and I found the beginning fledgling stages to be very painful and took a lot of work to get through. So my question is twofold. How do you go about continuing to improve your craft and get better at the game? What goals do you set for yourself? And 2, how do we as sort of more experienced GMs reach out to other fledgling GMs and help them get over that hump?
10,000 hours.
Just keep going, man. It gets so much better.
It's all Malcolm Gladwell. It's all outliers. You put in 10,000 hours and you're going to be great.
So to answer your second question, how do you reach out to new storytellers? Play in their games.
Okay.
Give them direction while you're playing in their games. Don't be afraid to talk to them between their games and say, hey, I know noticed you did this thing, and that might have been a rookie move. Let's talk about how you can make that better in your next game, because I want to enjoy what you're running for me.
And to go against the 10,000 hours, sometimes you have to be the bigger person and say, you know what, I'm going to put the screen down tonight, and Bonnie, I know you're new, but why don't you run tonight? And just give that new player a chance.
Don't tell Bonnie on that night. Tell Bonnie like 3 weeks earlier. Don't kill Bonnie.
It's also important to talk. I mean, if your players are really just rubbing you the wrong way, to find out why. Think about it yourself. What's bothering you, and then talk to them and say why. I mean, don't be confrontational about it, but like, why are you guys doing this stuff? And that you may be trying to run the wrong way, and they're just pulling the other way. But it is, as you put the more time in, all that pain is learning. You're like, I know what happens when I do this. I have scars from it, so we're gonna go this other way.
Thank you very much.
All right, and on the back microphone.
Hi. So we do a lot of homebrew games at our house, and conversely, we have a lot of opposing opinions about something. So my question for all of you was, what is your ratio of combat to plot?
That's so very Sun.
And then, how important are your NPCs to further your plot? Are they involved, or are they just exclamation?
Are you writing a panel description?
So we've got one main question here that I'd like to have us focus on. What's the ratio between combat to plot in your games? And I know for me personally, combat is plot. You're up against an NPC, and how he acts isn't just combat mechanics. It's how that NPC thinks. So it's important to always have the plot behind that person in mind when you're doing things that involve dice rolling.
Similarly, I'd also say most of us, other than a con game or a pickup game, we probably know our players. So I can look around and go, okay, Randy's chewing on his nails. He's probably had a bad day at work. He's going to want to kill some shit. I'm just going to throw in a good old brawl, get this started. Maybe we'll blow off some of that steam before I try to have him sit down for those delicate negotiations in the second act.
And it is like, every group's different. Some nights are different. You can't, that finding a ratio is important, but varying it up is too. Because if they always expect, well, we do 45 minutes of this other thing and then a half hour to an hour of combat, and then now you don't bust it out, throw a couple minutes here, but the ratio, there's no magic ratio. I think you got to find it.
I disagree. There's a magical ratio. It's the ratio that keeps your players interested and having fun. They've said it over and over, but ask your players before the game night. Be like, hey, how's everybody feeling? Are you feeling like a lot of combat tonight? Or are we going to be okay having those diplomatic negotiations with the Prince of, Calvazan or whatever? So it is really about talking to your players in that case, knowing who you're running for and what they are looking for in their game. And that's super important.
Yeah, absolutely, I would agree. I usually have at least one combat in basically every game I run, but you just let the players guide it, right? If they want to go and kill some stuff, they're going to go straight sociopath and start killing stuff. And really, I just leave it up to them.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and go with the front mic now.
Hi. Okay. I have this really great idea for a draw ranger with a card of gold.
Great. You want to go to the bottom?
Yeah, we're on the back microphone.
Do you have any tips for bringing in players that are brand new to role-playing, brand new to pen and paper specifically, mixed with perhaps people a little more experienced, how to kind of bring them out of their shells and get them participating in what can be an intimidating experience?
Move them closer to you. Not a joke. Make them
physically sit closer to you?
Sit them next to you.
Huh.
Feed them notes over the course of the adventure. Reach over and say, I don't know, I think you better make a savings throw because I don't know, whatever, right? Your job will you do that, then the other players will realize that the focus is shifted away from them and onto the new person, and they will be brought out of their shell very quickly.
I would also add, don't be afraid to give them power. Normally we're thinking, okay, we've got 5 players at the table, I don't want to play favorites, you're all going to have equal power. I might go, this is Ben's first night, you know what, he's getting that +5 bow. He may not keep it after tonight, but for tonight, his character is going to have that thing, or maybe he has the knowledge that everyone else has been searching for the last few sessions. And by all means, let them play the character they want to play. I know in certain games, you might say, oh, this type of character is more difficult to play. Fudge it if needed. If they come to the table saying, I want to play a street samurai or a wizard or whatever, let them play that thing they want, even if it may be suboptimal for the ideal party balance.
I did do something, though, recently that I just remembered where we have a game, in Rodney's game, my developer, Gabby Weidling, had never played an RPG before. So we let her play Mike Failhour's Bat Familiar. There are no rules for playing a familiar as a player character. Doesn't matter. She didn't need them because she didn't know them, right? And she had a blast, right? She was doing every investigation, everything, and then every now and then she'd get killed. But I mean, I'm not saying that's a solution, but it was an interesting way to bring her into the game.
Make sure everybody knows. I mean, it's not like anybody's going to be surprised that they know who was there last week and the week before, but they don't know necessarily how experienced that player is to start with. And if you're coming into the night and you're ready for a hardcore session, and the player next to you is like, "What are these things holding up the dice?" You're like, "Well, this is going to be trouble." So if they know ahead of time, and then you can kind of say, "Well, it'll be a little lighter tonight. We're going to do all the pieces, but we're not going to go, full on. We're going to have fun tonight, so that they get the fun. And if they're not down with what you guys think of as fun, then they may not fit."
I'm now imagining like introducing somebody to football this way, right? So, okay, don't worry about it. Just go out on the field.
Here's your helmet. You're the kicker.
Yeah. It can't hurt to spend a half hour with the person prior to the day.
But you are telling the rest of the team, all right, don't hit him in the head.
So now that we've compared role-playing games to football, I think we can move on to our next question there on the back microphone.
Hello. I'm a first-time GM, and we haven't played my game in about a month just because of holidays and stuff, and I'm really nervous about getting started. Do you ever
So I'm going to buy you some time for 1 second, if I may. How many people here, by show of hands, would describe themselves as new GMs? You guys rock.
Welcome to a grand tradition.
I just wonder how you deal with burnout or anxiety.
So, first of all, never be anxious about running a game for your friends, okay? Because you're the one who's in the hot seat. Everyone else is, they're not waiting for you to craft the magical best-selling novel of their lives that they're going to play through. You're there because they don't want to. Okay? So it's almost always the case. It's an elaborate game of not it, and you lost. So don't be anxious about doing it well at first. Don't be afraid of screwing up. Don't be afraid of killing the party. Don't be afraid of your fight not, I had 100 orcs and they killed them in 2 seconds and what do I do? Don't worry about that stuff because you're hanging out with your friends and you guys are going to have a good time no matter what you do. So that said, I have a friend who proclaims that if you miss 3 games, your game is dead. So get on that. Don't miss another game.
I'm doing something weird or different with my game, I quite regularly have a tiny panic attack right before I pull out my dice. So it's not unusual. But yeah, just to second what you were saying, you can't really screw it up, right? Anything you do is still going to be awesome.
No one ever walks out of the middle of an RPG.
I am going to have to disagree with that.
What did you do, Ben?
I don't really want to get into the details, but we are still people. We're still bound by social norms. And you can break those social norms to a degree where people will leave. And I do not expect this to happen, but remember, common rules of etiquette still apply. And as a GM, this could be things like, I'm not going to suddenly go, hey, we've all agreed we're playing a 4-color superhero game. Roll to be grappled and raped by a tentacle demon. That's not really where we're going here today. But I read once that we need to remember it's everyone's responsibility to bring the fun, and most people look at the GM as the one who's bringing the fun, and it's not a bad thing to remind your players, you need to help me here. If you're not giving me buy-in, let's just play Ticket to Ride tonight. And don't be afraid to maybe say, hey, I was expecting to run this 4-hour session. Things went really well. And that was 2 hours, so who wants Munchkin? They're not going to hate you for not being perfect.
They're not going to hate you.
All right, at the front here.
I have a few games under my belt, but I guess, you read the books, always say yes as the GM. Yes, and, or, yes, then what do you want to do? Well,
what book is that?
I have a problem where, one character wants to go evil immediately all the time, and I got another character, player who wants to just squelch that as much as possible. And those two are always at odds. I know everybody probably has run against that. Like, is there any good way to deal with that? Is there any advice?
Big dragon.
Kill Words you're looking for a ring of spell turning. So when the party member decides to fireball his own party, that's when that magic item comes out.
I kind of have an answer for this that might be a little kind of indie. So I would say this: if you've got the guy who wants to be evil, and you've got the guy who wants to be, a magical unicorn with all the powers in the world, wizard, half dragon, half kobold, half orc. That's too many halves. I would put them to the player gauntlet, and this is the rest of the players have to approve your concept. If all of your players approve the concept, then I'll let you play it. And the reason that is because people don't want to play with the guy who has we all want to play good characters and you want to play an evil character, we're going to veto it. And you're kind of the bad guy in that situation because you made other people the bad guy, but sometimes you have to be the bad guy. Sometimes you have to put your foot down. You can try to help them figure out a way that they can do a similar concept that fits within the themes, and so that's kind of the yes and that you're talking about. But it's not always saying yes. Don't be afraid to say no sometimes.
Yeah, seriously. What you can do at the beginning, if you really have this problem, is to lay down a structure to the game that would be hard to force in what you don't want in the game. So, for example, if you create a Dungeons and Dragons detective agency, none of those people are going to be bad guys, right? Because they're solving crimes and stuff like that, right? If you create a guild of heroes, they're not going to accept that kind of thing, right? But you may also have a broken player, and you ought to consider that possibility.
Yeah, that's definitely probably true.
You got to that's not a put a patch on it and it's done. That's a real problem.
He might not fit in the group. He might also be willing to go along. If you've got 4 players, he might be willing to go along if it's, we're going to run 3 campaigns where we're good guys, and he might be telling you, like, look, once in a while, can't we just be the jerks? And then you run one where you're the bad guys, and think about it. It's a good thing for development as a GM, too. Like, okay, the NPCs are the good guys now. You're going to spend this game, this whole campaign, like murdering and killing and stealing and running from the good guys. So maybe he's really asking, can we do one that's not the same? I'm tired of the same.
Yeah, a little bit of inter-party strife can be a lot of fun, but there are certainly people who like to take it too far. It sounds trite, but I mean, just talking to people and saying, you know, this is the kind of game we're trying to run, and if you don't want to play, bye.
So imagine that. As a GM, you want to be talking to people.
Thank you.
All right, in the back.
Hi. My question's about characters, because when I'm GMing, I'm one of those new GMs. I find I'm really good at world building and developing a story. But something I really struggle with is developing unique characters and portraying them in a way that gets my party involved. Like I talk in my voice. I'm kind of flat. I was wondering if you guys have any tips for developing unique characters and just bringing them to life.
I love doing that. So there's a million like character generation things on the web where you can find, and usually I just print out a big list, like angry, right, or slinky and sly, right, and I'll just pick one, right, and then when I'm describing the character, I'll bring that into it, right, like he's wearing a greasy fedora and slouching in a corner, right, and then usually, because I don't like to do the player voices, usually that'll be enough, and then I'll give him a tick, right, yeah, he sits with his there's just something like that that makes it unique.
I would say beforehand, maybe create just 2 or 3 personalities that are in a way faceless. Okay, so I've got this guy, always strokes his beard, really aggressive, always leans in too close when he talks. I don't know though if that's going to be the butcher, the captain of the guard, or the demonologist that night. I've just got a personality ready. And if I have just 1 or 2 sentences reminding myself of that as the night goes on, I go, oh, okay, they didn't go to any of those guys. They're at the fish merchant's booth. All right, he's going to be the overly aggressive guy, and we'll just slot that personality in.
That's good.
And don't be afraid to exaggerate. Since they may only meet that NPC for a few minutes, maybe half an hour at most, they're not going to have time to learn his entire backstory, but they can at least learn if he's got halitosis and just won't keep away from me.
You don't want to do it all the time, but you can also have you be an intermediary. He's not even really talking, so they'll ask you, well, what's his opinion? You're like, oh, this guy, he don't like you. Like he is just aggressive, he don't like you. And have them kind of think up the things he would be saying in his head. So they're kind of doing part of your job for you when you're like, oh, I know what this character is, but in their own heads they're doing the voices. And you haven't even told them what he said. They just know he's really not going to help us. He's a dirtbag. He's just no good. But you don't always want to use it, but you can be that, and it helps them feel like, well, he's on our side. You're not, kind of. Always on their side.
So I don't know if you've ever played the Dresden Files in the Fate system, but they have this really cool world building system where your players come to the table with you, and their very first session is building the world, the city that you're in. And one of the things that they do is they help you create named NPCs, and they give them descriptors, and they together make them these NPCs. And so later, when you're playing the game and you pull out these NPCs, your players already know a lot about them, about description and stuff like that, because they invested themselves in them. And I think that's actually really cool, because what it's done is, first of all, it's taken some work off of you, and anything that takes work off of you is awesome. And then also what it's done is it's invested the players in already kind of knowing these personalities and what to expect out of the personality and how to approach that personality, so you don't have to sit there and try to make up a funny voice or make up a funny description or anything like that, because they've already got an idea of what this guy's like in their head because they made it.
Let's not rule out this advice, though. Get good at funny voices. I mean, it's a thing, right? I mean, it's actually, you're portraying a whole bunch of characters, and so put some time into, practice in front of a mirror, all that stuff, right? Because it is nice. It's not the sole DMing art or anything, but it is an art. And so people are in for the story. Give them a story.
Okay, let's go with the front.
Hi. So I've been running a 6-player campaign for a little while now, and
Bless your heart.
actually it tends to go very smoothly through both plot points and combat. But I always have this 1 or 2 players that decide when it's not their turn during combat, they want to strike up a conversation about work or what they found on the internet that day, and it derails. And combat that should just be taking a half hour to an hour easily takes twice that long. I was wondering if there was any way I can keep them engaged during combat or do something make them pay attention.
Where are you sitting in the table?
So if it's a long rectangular table, I'm in dead center.
Okay, that's good. That's good. At least that certainly is going to help.
Welcome to game mastering. I still struggle with this problem. Like, this is a universal, raise your hand if you run games and this happens to you. Everyone in here should raise their hand. Yes, this is a universal problem. And like I said, I still struggle with it. Some of the ways that you can keep it engaging and is to I've done all sorts of things like time limits. Like it's your turn. You've got this much time to tell me what you're going to do. So if you're talking in between turns and you have to be like, oh, what's going on now? What just happened? Because I wasn't paying attention because I was talking to somebody. Well, your character was distracted and you lost your turn. And sometimes that brings it into focus really quick to players that are like, oh, I didn't get to do my thing. I'm really upset now. That's a little negative reinforcement.
That's what
you can reward players who are on task and stuff like that. Like, well, so and so is doing really good, so they can get a bonus for paying attention or something like that. You can also just tell people that you won't tolerate that kind of stuff at your table, and if they can't really, talking is one thing. Like if they've got a notebook and they're doodling in between sessions or they're doing something non-distracting, that's one thing. But if they're actually striking up conversations, that's vastly different. So I would say try to put your foot down about that not just being tolerated.
It might be that you're playing the wrong system too.
Yeah.
Because if you're really playing a system where your combats are taking a half hour and people are starting to wander away, that might be a problem in the game. Like it might be that what you're doing is just simply taking too long for them to pay attention over that large group. And so I think you might want to just look at what you're doing and say, can I streamline this to make it go faster so that they don't have time to do that?
You mean saying, all right, I want you to decide what you're doing right now as... Sure.
Just make sure that there's nothing rotten at the core. That is, if you're got a thing where it takes a person, I'm making something up here. If before every time the wizard acts, they have to check their spell book, right? And they have to flip through this thing and say, okay, hold on a second. I think I'm going to cast Cone of Cold. That's a checkout point, right? So maybe what you can do is sort of say, I'm going to go around the table quickly, right? Not punitively necessarily in the way Danielle was describing, but just like when I come to you, be ready and do it. And if your game can't handle that, not you, but your game, it might actually be a problem with the game.
All right, Mike, I'm going to cut you off at this second. Our panelists are going to be available for a little while after the end of the panel, and we can get into some more specifics on this question if you like. But we've got people in the rows. We want to make sure we get through everybody's questions. All right, in the back there.
One thing that I've done also is give players roles like track initiative. You can let somebody know that they're going next and things like that to try and keep them into it. But my question is, I have a diverse group of players. Some people are the power gamers. They want their numbers to go up as high as possible. They don't want to be these brutal and efficient killing machines. And some people just want to pick feats and talents that, hey, this is cute, or, so I'm not really sure as far as combat goes. If I make make it just at the lower end, then they feel inconsequential because the brutal killing machines are killing everything. But at the higher end, I'm just murdering the people that would rather the little necklace that makes a floating hand versus a +1 weapon. So
I'm going to give you a rule of mine for being a game master. It doesn't leave this room.
Have you heard of this thing called the internets?
When you start out at a new table, pick somebody and make them your enemy.
Don't take that advice.
It's really good. It's really good because what you do is you've got that player, right, who's maxed out their character, right, and you now have a target, right? You now have a thing that you can fire arrows at with impunity. Right? And the other players are sort of like going, okay, I got to just stay in the middle of this. Don't drop a fireball in the middle of the party. Drop it on the edge. Right? It will actually keep everybody in roughly equal power balance, and they won't have any idea why.
All right. For our next set of questions, just to make sure we can get through everyone, we're going to go down the line, and we'll have one of you answer a question, then we'll move on to the next question and have the next person answer it. So at the front here, for Mike.
All right. Well, so my group has been from 1 to 30 so far, and this is their final session next week. And so everybody's gotten their specializations by now, and they all have specific skills they're really good at. Is it too heavy-handed to have hard counters for their final encounter? Is there any tips to introduce these hard counters to their characters without being like, oh yeah, this guy is impervious to physical damage?
Well, let's start at the highest level, which is you're at the end of your campaign, and there's no guarantee that this very group is going to get back together for another one, right? So you need to go out with something amazing. Like, you need to put pressure on yourself right now. Because this is the thing, right? This is the thing that they're going to talk about for a long time. So I think it's important to approach it the way that comic books handle team books, right? So like Kid Flash is always going to run into the opposing speedster guy, right? Robin's not going to take care of that guy, right? So I think you want to make something where everybody has an amazing opportunity to shine in that period of time because they're going to talk about that for a really long time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, in the back, for Ben.
Hey, I've been DMing for about 3 years, and I usually do homebrews, but one of the things that I have kind of a problem with is that I either make way too much content, and then the players only go through a tenth of it, or I'm a little underprepared because I'm like, okay, well that didn't work out. I'm gonna rein it back a little. So, any tips or tricks on that?
Question: do you enjoy creating the content?
It's like a love-hate relationship.
Okay, that's a fair answer. So I was going to say, the parts that you enjoy, don't feel like you're wasting time on. If you are a Tolkien-esque linguist and you just really enjoy language, great, go to town, create as much as you like. For the parts that aren't, look at your players, see what do they tend to do. Let's flesh that part of the world out first. If they are the sort that really want to socialize with every NPC, then let's create some interesting cultural quirks for them to bump into. If they're the sort that want to play politics, let's talk about the nobility, and just sort of prioritize your time. Top priority should be what's going to be interesting both to you and to them. Secondary priority is the fun stuff. The other thing I might suggest is if you have some members of the groups that like creative writing, be willing to give them part of the world. You can give them limitations and say, okay, this nation needs to be a fascist oligarchy with a strong monotheistic religion. But within that, you have freedom as the player to tell me, the GM, about this nation. And most players, if you give them that power, they will happily suddenly come up with the craziest, most interesting nation they can, And as several people mentioned earlier, when they finally encounter members of that nation in-game, they're going to be far more invested because, well, that's their baby.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, up front.
So I've been running games on again, off again for about 20 years now, and most of the off again has been because nobody else wants to GM, and I'm just fresh, bloody out of ideas. What do you do about that?
Here, remember how we were talking about running modules?
And don't say modules because that's way, way too easy.
No. So when I think I'm fresh out of ideas and nobody else wants to run a game because I'm the game master, and no, you have to run werewolf for us because you're the only one who can run werewolf, and I don't want to do it. I want to play. And I think I'm fresh out of ideas. It depends on who I'm running for. If it's the same group for the past 20 years, then this won't work. So I'm gonna have to give you a different advice, but recycle. Okay, I ran a game 5 years ago. This is totally new people. They've never run through this plot before, and I have all these notes because I don't throw anything away. So you can recycle, and then there's also I like to look for inspiration. I have to do that a lot already to write, and so I will be like, hey, I want to run a Star Wars game, so I'm going to go and read some random thing in the Star Wars universe that I've never read before and see if some of those situations and plots can't give me some cool ideas. I want to run a sci-fi game. First I need to find a good one, and then I'm going to go watch a bunch of sci-fi movies to kind of give me ideas on plots and stuff. So I do look for inspiration in media, and then sometimes I'll use modules to kind of give me a groundwork of where to start something like that. But I'll essentially pull instead of from myself, from outside places. Do you know about Obsidian Portal?
Tell me about Obsidian Portal.
Obsidian Portal is great, and we can definitely talk about it a little
I'm
more
not going to tell you
later.
about it.
But
What I'm going to tell you really quickly about it is it's a resource for game masters. Go check it out.
Thank you.
all right, in the back.
Hi, I'm pretty new to DMing. I'm going to be starting one in a couple of months, and two of the people that have asked to be part of this campaign are brothers who are just completely polar opposites. One is I'm going to min-max my character, rush in, kill everything. I would roll a level 20 on a level 1 campaign if I could. The other one doesn't care about combat in the slightest. He is all about the storyline. In fact, he will give his character curses and all sorts of things in order to make it more of a even thing. What I'm wondering is, should I just tell one of them, don't come? Because I do not see, they are brothers, they do like to argue a little bit, but the player interaction would just be priceless. So, I'm afraid that the game is, I'm not sure if I can tailor it to both individuals.
How many people do you have?
I'm going to have 4.
You're going to have 4 and those are just 2 of them?
Yeah.
Where do the other 2 lie?
Right in the middle.
Are they okay with this dichotomy that's...
They are the spouses of the 2.
This is a counseling panel now?
So no, I think this is a sitcom pitch.
I'm planning on recording all of this.
This group knows what's going down. I mean, it's not going to be a surprise. So, again, they obviously want to, well, at least some of them obviously want you running it, and the rest are willing to be along for the ride. If you may need to take some restrictions and really pull it in, but it sounds like it would, especially with that group, you don't want to tell one of the brothers he can't show up.
Especially if you're telling his wife that he can, which he can.
It can be, it could be really hard. You're gonna, as a new GM especially, you're gonna face some very interesting challenges from about
6 different social dynamics you've created.
Do you have any tips for trying to balance that?
I would talk to those 2 brothers ahead of time and see if they can do something to help synergize themselves. That familiar is where they went, well, I'm going to use the race that I built. This is my race, my homeland, and they were super invested in it. And when it came time to play in it, it just worked really, really well. So yeah, I would either try using an established setting or go straight through the world building with the whole party.
Okay, in the back.
Yeah, I've been DMing for a long time, but my 10-year-old daughter wants to play with her friends, and I'm terrified.
Awesome! You have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here. Don't screw it up. Yeah, that's really cool, and the fact that they're coming to you to occupy their time rather than any of the other forces in their life is amazing, and you need to seize that opportunity.
How do I not screw it up?
All right. There's an old trick. Kids are smarter than you. Okay? They process on a vastly higher level than you do because you're distracted in so many ways, and you're trying to make sure that everything's great, and they don't care about that nonsense at all. All they care about is having the time to shine and to learn and to play with each other and stuff like that. Don't simplify. Don't just let them run with whatever you put out in front of them, because they will figure out what they want to do fast, and you need to adapt much faster than you're used to in anything else in your life. So I mean, because you're not just dealing with one of them at this point. Now you're dealing with, like, I don't know, a whole school bus full of people. So you know, they're going to come at you a million miles an hour. Stay alert, eyes on target, and just try to be ready to go with whatever it is they throw at you.
If you have a moment to see me afterwards, I have a few systems I could recommend for that.
Oh yeah, sure.
All right. I apologize to the people who are still in line. We are running right at time here. We're going to be up here in front after the end of the panel.
Actually, no, I think we're going to need to be up front. The enforcers will need to clear.
I apologize. We will be out front of the room right afterwards, and we would definitely love to answer your guys' questions. I just wanted to leave the room with a couple final thoughts that we have learned today for either those burgeoning GMs or for those who are a little more experienced. First off, don't kill Bonnie. Secondly, you're the GM because you lost the game of keep away. And finally, anything that takes work off of you is awesome.